Hi there, and thanks for stopping by the shop today where we're going to be performing an overdue oil change on this car. Now, if it's been a while since you've changed the oil in your car, or if you've never done something like this, feel free to follow along as we're going to be going through all the steps necessary to complete this very simple job with a few basic tools. Now, some folks might ask, with the convenience of all of the quick change oil places available to me out there, what's the advantage of changing my own oil? And for me, it comes down to cost. And what I mean by that is that I can buy the 5 quarts of oil that I need and a good quality filter for less than $35.
Now take a look at this price list that I found posted outside a quick oil change shop near me. Now, if you have a vehicle that was made within the last, 15 years or so, it's going to call for synthetic oil. So you can forget about the bottom 2 rows, and now you're looking at paying at least $100 and up to $120 for this service and the convenience of a quick oil change.
And then there's the issue of quality, especially when it comes to the filters that they offer at these places. I prefer to use a higher end filter such as this Wix filter here, and a lot of times at those quick change places you're just going to get stuck with whatever standard filter that they've got. And finally, how quick are these quick change places at the end of the day? Especially when you have to consider the fact that you're going to have to drive there, perhaps wait in line for a couple of people ahead of you to get taken care of, have your oil changed, and then head home. It's going to be 45 minutes, an hour at the very least. And I'm telling you, we can get this oil changed in 25 to 30 minutes max. Now, in order to determine exactly what kind of motor oil your car requires and how much of it you're going to need, you've got a couple of choices. First of all, you can just check your owner's manual. Maybe go to the back, look at the index, look up capacities and fluids. Or you can do what I do, and that is I just go to my local auto parts store, tell the guy behind the counter the make, model, and year of my car. He looks it up on his computer and he lets me know what type of motor oil is recommended for my car and what type of filters are also available at his store for my car, and typically gives me a choice of, do you want the low end, the medium end, or the high end? I typically choose the high end because I think that's an important component in the car, but it'll be up to you at that point. And while you're at the parts store, you're going to want to pick up a specialty tool, something like this, that's going to help you loosen and reattach the filter. Now, there's several kinds, and they all work pretty well. And again, I think you want to make sure that you've got the filter in hand. Make sure that the tool that you are going to purchase is one that fits the filter that you're going to be using on your vehicle. So I guess this is a good time to talk about, what other tools and equipment are you going to need besides the filter wrench that we just talked about. And, you're going to need, obviously, some way to get that oil drain plug off. And so some kind of wrench, socket wrench, or, maybe an open-ended wrench like that. So I would have a good set of sockets or a good set of box wrenches like this. Either in regular American standard size or metric, or both, because these days where cars are manufactured, you may be dealing with metric, you might be dealing with American standard. So, these are tools that, most people have already around the house, but if you don't have them, you're going to have to purchase them. You can get these at, any big box store, as well as the auto parts store if you're there. Now, in order to get to that drain plug and the filter, for the most part, you're going to need to get under the car, and that means you're going to have to lift the car up. And so, the simple solution to that for most folks is you can use the jack that comes with your car, follow the owner's manual instructions on how to lift the car up, and that'll at least get you some room to get under the car at a minimum. Now, I recently did a video on this hydraulic jack that I repaired, so I'm going to be using that instead of the jack that came with my car, just because I have it. But again, you can use the jack that came with your car if you want. Now, it doesn't really matter if you use the jack that came with your car or, a hydraulic jack or something else. But, I always recommend that without a doubt, you're going to need to use some jack stands. So I've got a couple of jack stands here as an example. And you put those in as sort of a belt and suspenders approach. In addition, I always recommend you block the back wheels. And I've got these 2 plastic wedges that I use, but you can really use just about anything. You can use a brick or a piece of wood or a log, anything to just, wedge behind the back wheels to make sure the car doesn't move once it's up on jacks. And finally, when you're draining out the oil, you're going to want to have something to drain the oil into. So again, this is just something you can pick up at pretty much any auto parts store again, or big box store. So that's it. And it might seem like a lot, but really you can pick up all of the equipment that's shown here for less than it's going to cost you at one of the quick change oil places to get your oil taken care of. So before we do anything, we're going to block these back tires. We're going to set the parking brake. We're going to pop the hood, locate the filler cap and remove it. Just set it right there. And now we're going to set the jack in place and pump it up. Next, we're going to set the jack stands, and then we're going to let the jack down on the stands. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I do happen to have another floor jack, and I'm using that as a backup to the one side that I first lifted up, because the other floor jack is on the other side. So I've got, as I said, a belt and suspenders approach, both with the floor jack and with the jack stands. And now we're ready to crawl into the car to access the oil drain plug as well as the oil filter. Now, before we get under there, I want to show you just one thing. I do have this piece of cardboard here. It comes in handy. You don't need it, but I'm going to be scooching along the floor here, and I'd rather just do it on a piece of cardboard versus, on the cement floor itself. So let's get under there and see what we've got. So there's the oil pan drain plug. We're going to loosen that up. First with a wrench, then with our fingers. And there we go. And we're going to let that oil drain into our container here while we go get the tool for the filter, which is right there. It looks like it's just about done draining, so we're going to put this plug back in. And tighten it up. And tighten it up. Just needs to be snug. We don't want it to be too tight, because then it's going to be too difficult to come off later. I forgot to mention that it's probably a smart idea to have a rag handy so you can kind of wipe things off here. So now we can move our attention to the oil filter itself. And that's where that handy tool comes in. This shouldn't be on too tight. Once it loosens up, we just want to make sure that our catch can is centered underneath that, and then loosen this by hand. Again, this is where that rag comes in handy. You're going to get a little oil on you. Some people wear those neoprene gloves that you can dispose of. I don't mind the manly smell of a little bit of used motor oil on my hands. We'll let that drain for a little bit while we prepare the new filter for installation. Now, some people do this next part, some people don't. But what I like to do is to fill this filter up with oil and then put it on. And in some cases you can't really do that because the oil filter is actually on the top. It's upside down here or somewhere up here. But in this case, it's actually obviously underneath the car. I'm going to fill it just with a little bit of oil. And that's going to make, I'm not going to fill it all the way to the top, but it's going to make sure that it doesn't have to fill with oil before it starts circulating through the engine. There's just a little bit of delay when that happens, and I just like to make sure that the engine doesn't go without some lubrication for too long. Now, regardless of whether or not you fill the filter pre-fill the filter with oil or not, you're going to want to just put a little bit of a coating of oil on this rubber gasket here. It just kind of helps it seal a little bit better. Now back onto the car once again, and all we're going to do is just carefully take this filter and we're going to put it up here. We're going to thread it into those threads that you see there. It's slippery, so be careful. You don't drop it. Not that it would hurt it, but it would certainly make a mess because it's full of oil, as I pointed out. So we just want to take our time till we feel it starting to thread. And there it goes. Okay, I'm going to wipe it off with my rag. And I'm just going to tighten it by hand as tight as I can get it by hand. I'm not going to put a wrench on it. We don't want it to tighten too much. And that's it. So we've got our drain plug in, we've got our filter in, and now it's time to put the fresh oil in. So before we put the oil in, we're going to let this car back down so it's laying flat on the ground when we put the oil in. That way all the oil doesn't go to the back of the catch can. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm rather particular about the filter that we use when we're changing the oil, but not so much about the oil itself. And that's because as long as it's the right viscosity, in this case SAE 0W20, they're pretty much all the same. All of these oils are fulfilled in the same factory. And really the only difference is the packaging. So, you can have a fancy label, you can have a fancy looking container. As long as the viscosity is what the engine calls for, I don't see the need to spend, $30 or $35 on the same oil in a fancy case versus something I can pay, $20 for. The manual calls for 4.2 quarts. This is 5 quarts. I know that I put a little bit into the filter, so I'm not going to have to put this whole thing in, but most of it, and the rest of it, that's fine. So let's start with that. So let's check the fill stick and see how we're doing. It's hard to tell really because it's so clean and clear, but if I turn it over, I can see that we're between the two marks and closer to the full mark than the empty mark. So I think we're good. Now you might think we're done, but we have to get rid of the old oil. And the way that I do it is I just simply pour it back into the container that the new oil came out of. Now, I know there's a little bit of good oil still left in there. I'm not too worried about that. You can see that's pretty dark compared to the stuff that just went in the engine. My local community has a hazardous waste collection day, and I'll take this container up there. They have that, once a month or so. So I'll keep it until it's time to take it up there, and then I'll drop it off there, and we'll make sure that it doesn't end up somewhere where it can do some harm to the environment. All right, we don't want to forget that the parking brake is on, so we want to disengage that. We want to start the car, check our dashboard, make sure there's no warning lights on, and it looks like we're good, other than my seatbelt. Nothing red, so it looks like we're fine. All right, that's good news. Well, I'm going to put these here so I don't forget to take them up to the community center. The hazardous waste collection day is actually day after tomorrow, so that's real convenient. Listen, I appreciate you sticking around, and I hope you learned something. I hope you found it enjoyable and entertaining. I know I did. You take care, and we'll see you in the next one.